All right. Good morning and welcome, everyone. We're excited to have Kory Murphy from Multnomah County with us this morning. This is our next session in our Economic Resiliency Micro Summit series as part of the TECHLANDIA Summit and Design Sprint. In this one, we're going to talk a little bit about cities as ecosystems and the importance of people networks. And this is set up in a sort of informal Q&A format, more conversational. And after we go through some moderated questions, we're going to, of course, be fielding questions from folks who are participating. You can feel free to put them in the chat. You can, of course, make sure that you send them to TAO admin. And we'll monitor the chat box throughout the discussion. And you can engage via the participant icon. And during the course of our conversation, all participants will have been muted. And so we ask you to please remain on mute unless a TAO staff member unmutes you and calls on you to talk. And also wanted to mention that as part of this TECHLANDIA Summit series, we're going to be focusing on a few different things, including economic resiliency, mobility, future of work, and then also human factors and the significance of the environment and health and wellness. And throughout the discussions so far, we've really been exploring the importance of systems. And in today's discussion, we're going to focus specifically on the importance of people networks. And what's cool about Kory and his work is that he's been working for years now on behalf of the county, looking at different ways that they can better engage the broader community, whether it's in terms of technology infrastructure or delivery of county services. Also wanted to mention that throughout this discussion, if you all want to post on social media, we definitely encourage that. And of course, if you take a screenshot of the two of us chatting, we'll be happy to reshare as well. Also, what we want to say is that this will be recorded and then posted and available on the TAO YouTube channel afterwards, about 24 hours after. And we'll also be sharing this out after the fact through our channels and our networks as well. A huge thank you to all the investors in the TECHLANDIA Summit. We really appreciate your sponsorship, and we're excited to explore topics related, of course, to economic resiliency, mobility, future of work, as well as human factors. And our sponsors include AT&T, Portland State University, PGE, Autodesk, Comcast, Google, and the League of Oregon Cities. Finally, it's my pleasure to introduce Kory from Multnomah County. And Kory, we're happy to have you with us here today, and I thought it'd be great to start off by just asking you to explain a little bit about your position at the county and your background.
Yeah, Skip, I really appreciate this. Appreciate the opportunity to participate in the TECHLANDIA Summit. And really, I've appreciated partnering with the Technology Association of Oregon for now. I think it's going on three years now, 3 or 4 years now. Again, my name is Kory Murphy. I am born and raised here in Portland, Oregon at Emmanuel Hospital about 47 years ago. I currently work as the Equity Inclusion Manager for Multnomah County within the Department of County Assets, and that's very, very important. County assets, you think of county assets as the department that manages all of the strategic infrastructure that allows the county to do what it does. And so we are in some ways either the heart or the lungs of the entire sort of county operation, the internal organs of the operation. And so we do a lot. We manage technology, we manage the buildings, we manage data, we help build and improve and maintain the things that allows the county to do what it does. The reason why I was hired is to make sure and ensure that we are building those things and maintaining these types of infrastructure, critical resources, and I'll get back to that language soon. We're doing it in a way that ends up as justice for all. It ends up being something that everyone can benefit from. And so in past, infrastructure really was only is only sort of owned and operated by corporations and by a few folks. And so what my job at Multnomah County is to make sure that we are building the things that the people need in order to live a healthy life here in Multnomah County. So that's kind of the background for me. I got 4 biological kids, 3 non-biological kids. I got a wonderful wife, wonderful family, wonderful friends. I love football, and I'm ready to build the kind of cities that we need in this town so everybody can thrive. So again, appreciate the opportunity, Skip.
We appreciate you spending some time with us and sharing your insight. So I know we've had a chance to talk a little bit about your thinking about cities as ecosystems, and I'm wondering, how would you describe a community ecosystem?
So an ecosystem, before sort of getting into the description, it's actually a natural thing that we all want, meaning it's when you envision waking up in your paradise environment, all of the things that you see and you envision in that paradise, are things that actually we can build. And so when we think about the paradise, there is sort of 2 parts of this, right? The first part is a set of social systems, human social systems. And then the second part is the second part is actually a set of critical resources. And so when you look at an ecosystem collectively, the critical resources power the human social systems, and the social systems are dependent on the critical resources to function, and the people who are managing the social systems are using the critical resources for that particular reason. And so a healthy ecosystem is both taken in consideration of thank you for that slide. I sent folks a slide late. I sent them a slide late, so I'm glad that Justin had a chance to put it up. But you can see the definition on the left-hand side there. The human ecosystem is defined as a coherent system of biophysical and social factors. But I want to point specifically to, again, the set of human social system factors and a set of critical resource factors. And notice that the critical resources fuel and power the human social system. And the human social system is in some ways dependent on the critical resources, as well as the people driving the social systems use the critical resources as well. So they have to shape and manage those. So I would say, simply put, that we in the Portland Metro, Multnomah County area have a challenge ahead of us. And that challenge is not to simply keep fighting racism. Instead of fighting against racism, how about we build the human ecosystems that people need in order to be healthy and safe and thrive? Now I'm going to pause there because this particular model has some assumptions. So I just want to pause there, Skip, and see if you have any questions or thoughts before we continue and digging in this particular model.
That's great. I think that if folks do have questions about the model, Justin, I think it's okay if you leave this up for a couple minutes, right, as we continue talking. And that way, if folks have questions about it, feel free to throw those in the chat, and we can revisit this as part of the Q&A portion. And I was thinking a little bit about, you mentioned this focus on kind of improving health, wellness, et cetera, of folks who are here. And so where do you see like the biggest sort of gaps or challenges in supporting people networks from the standpoint of local government? Like, what are the limits to local government in that work?
So it's a fantastic question, and let me zoom out real quick before I hit that question. And I want to say that when you look at the social system, right, you zoom in there and you see social institutions, you see social cycles and social order. When you think of people in the United States of America, when you think of people here in the Portland metro area, what people do you think benefit mostly on those social institutions, from those social institutions? So again, it's a rhetorical question, but again, which people benefit mostly? Which people do not benefit from these social systems? In other words, which communities of people have the most positive experiences within those social institutions, and which ones have the most negative experiences within those institutions? Now you go over to the social cycles, and we can ask the same questions. When you think of physiological cycles or institutional cycles, which people groups benefit mostly from those cycles? And then you can keep moving down into the social order, right? Wealth, power, status. Okay, so the social system is clearly, if we are being very honest, Black people and other excluded people of color and communities are negatively subject to the human social system in the United States of America. Now, you might argue that, but I would say largely, it is the reality is that Black and excluded people have a negative experience in the social system. And my analysis, not just mine, but a collective analysis is forming around the reasons being is that when you look at the critical resources list, there is no ownership, there is no wealth, there is no control of barely any of those things in that bucket. And even the fact of our own identity, our own myths and beliefs as a community, as in a culture. So if we can't even own our own identity, let alone our own information, or access to good, clean water, a good land that I can grow good food and have good trees so I can breathe good air. Like if I don't have ownership of those things, then what happens is that I struggle in the human social system because there's nothing that is built or designed for me. Now, you asked the question, Skip, where are the gaps? The gaps are in the critical resource area of ownership, of design, of community development, of capacity development, and bottom line, wealth and asset building. The truth is that we don't own anything, we will not take care of it. The opposite is also true. If human beings own something, typically we take care of it. Black people in this country have built this country, yet we don't own anything in the critical resources area. And when I say anything, I'm saying proportionately, it's nothing compared to what's on the other side. So the answer that I would say is government's opportunity is to push and to toe the line around justice and ensuring that the public sector and the nonprofit community-based sector can play together to build these types of critical resources. So there is a bit more ownership around the human social system that then is dependent on, again, those resources and so on. So I'll stop there. Questions, thoughts, anything else?
That was very well said, very concise, articulate. And as I think more about that point, like what are, outside of government for a second, which of the sort of ecosystems locally are the ones that you see as playing a big role in addition to government in helping to address some of these inequities, right? So, You know, is it like the digital environment, neighborhoods, businesses, the environmental community? I mean, where are some of those sort of competitive advantages that we already have here in the region that could be making a big impact, maybe in collaboration with government? What does that look like in your mind?
Love it. So honestly, it looks like and many people might have a struggle with this statement, but that's okay. You can hit me up if you want to. We can talk more about it. But what it looks like is all of the above, but it has to be a strategic approach to for excluded members of excluded people. People from excluded communities, excuse me, to lead and drive and design and implement and own, period. So almost the question is, the answer is pick one area, find some people who you know are sort of part of an excluded community who have expertise, and then take take a step back and support them in winning. That's the opportunity, instead of the private sector looking at these as simple ways to extract more resources, more data, and cause continued harm and fragmentation in many of these already excluded communities. Instead of doing that, let's bring our resources to bear. Let's identify who's already doing the work in some of these key ecosystem areas: energy, technology, water. Why are we still struggling with water in this region? I don't get it. All the technology and all the environmental experts we have in this region, there's no reason why any inner city school should have dirty water. There's no, I don't understand why. So I guess what I'm saying, the answer to at least my response, Skip, is pick one, but then it's the methodology. Stop trying to be the white savior or have lone rangerism, right? Instead of that, let's go and build a team of people who can bring something together so we can build wealth and ownership in communities who have been excluded from that. So I would say all the above, pick one, and then let's zoom in and find the people who are already doing the work in an incredible way and support that work that's already going on and enhance it.
Well said. It was interesting as I was thinking about one thing you mentioned, which was the importance of kind of ownership, and especially around property, right? So a lot of people overlook intellectual property when they're thinking about this equation, and you mentioned it like nail on the head with the data extraction that is often going on in different communities. And supposedly something's being provided for free, but in exchange you're giving up data somewhat unwittingly in a lot of cases. So I'm wondering, like, you know, from a intellectual property ownership standpoint, there is definitely an opportunity for tech to be thinking differently about its relationship with communities and how they empower those communities, not just by letting them use technology, by co-creating it, essentially helping the community own the IP, own the tech, own the data afterwards, and also define the reason why it's being created. But like, I'm wondering, so we did some work together on this design sprint last year, and I was wondering if you could share a little bit of your thoughts around that. And you know, it wasn't necessarily perfect, but it was a big step. And so what are your thoughts on maybe how some programs like that could potentially be helpful going forward in strengthening some of those connections between communities?
Yeah, great question, Skip. I would start out simply by saying that it's about with, not for or to. With the people. Don't do it for them. Don't do it to them. With. If it's true that we are the people, then we should be involved in designing what our society is going to be. And so governments, to me, and private sectors, one of their fatal flaws is not seeing our community as stakeholders and as designers and developers and scientists. Just because you all had access to go to schools more than other folks did, doesn't mean that other people can't design and innovate. And so when we treat people and bring them in as stakeholders, and then we all collaborate on something great, then we truly can break down racial and racial, gender-based, socioeconomic bull crap. I was gonna, sorry. We can do that by collaborating and building the things that we all need to survive. And I'm talking about our human species. I'm not talking about one group of people over another group of people. Our human species will only survive if we can build these kinds of human, sustainable ecosystems, right, that are able to adapt, as it says, over time. So I guess when I look back at the design sprint, it was a great step in the right direction, because we were able to see that there were powerful community-based organizations that came with incredible people, ideas, resources, and all they needed were a few pieces to kind of tighten some things up and some expertise. But it's amazing. You can do amazing things when people decide to come together and collaborate, and they're selfless, not worried about what they're going to get on the back end. And I think that's a really, really important piece. I really, again, Skip, I'll say this. I believe that our society here in Portland, Oregon, we are on once again a crossroads of choosing justice or profit. If we choose profit, we will sacrifice justice, and our species will continue to disintegrate. If we choose justice, we will be able to get all the resources we need to attain justice and build these kinds of ecosystems. But we are the ones that have to choose: public, private, and community-based organizations. We have to choose what we want to do in this juncture. And I believe we can build human ecosystems with everybody's expertise at the table.
Well said. Again, I mean, it's always really interesting chatting with you, because your perspective is great around where we create these intersection points between groups that often are kind of operating in their own silos. There's resources here, to your point, but like, how do we unlock those resources more collaboratively? There was, let's see here, a question just posted by Sonia. Let's see. How can the initiatives that are intended to address the social determinants of health support, enhance, and amplify these efforts?
Yeah. In fact, it's the basis, it's the foundation. It's all the programs that are driving on building the social determinants of health. All those determinants are built into this particular ecosystem model, right? The thing is that if we don't own what goes into our schools, right? If we don't own the content, if we don't have ownership and buy-in on the content, then our schools will continue to fail Black and brown people. Does that make sense? So we have to build schools that are relevant, that have high-speed fiber optic cable, that are energy efficient, all the things that we need in order to move toward 2030. So social determinants of health, absolutely foundational to this particular ecosystem model. Great question.
That was a great question, I agree. I also want to just pause for a sec, see if there's anyone else in the audience that wants to throw a question in the hopper. We got about 5 minutes left. Also, I've got a question for Kory. What haven't I asked? What hasn't come up today that if you were like, hey, I want some parting thoughts, and this is the question I wish I had been asked, what would that be?
It's a good question. I think the one thing that comes to mind is, what's next for you? Like,
Yeah.
I've been at the government for a minute, and I'm seeing all this stuff going down, and, I'm having dissonance, to be quite honest. It's tough to work for the government in a time like this, but you know, I don't know. I'm not saying I'm open for ideas, but I'm also saying that I don't know what the future does hold for me professionally, but I do know that I'm committed 1000% for making sure that these ecosystems are built for Black people all over this particular region and all over the world. So that's one thing I'm committed to. I don't know. Other than that, do I think the Ducks are going to play football this year? I sure the hell hope so, but I don't think so.
Well, we hope you stick around a little while longer. This work is really important, and it's awesome to have champions in a variety of different sectors. And I know what's interesting is just talking to a lot of people across the philanthropic community, nonprofit, government. I mean, there's a whole bunch of folks that have been really kind of pushing the envelope the last X number of years. And I think they're recognizing that there are institutional limits, and the crises that are unfolding now are kind of highlighting those in stark relief. And they're like, okay, do I stay here and continue to push the envelope? Or do the requirements of the crises we face require me to do something differently in a different location, you know, a different entity? And I think you're right. Portland's kind of in this inflection point. Anyway, I love this conversation. I feel like a half hour isn't long enough. And
to be continued.
Yes, exactly. So thank you, Kory, for, I know you're super busy. Thank you for taking some time. And we're going to head into the lunch hour here. And thank you all for joining us today. As I mentioned, we'll post this in our TAO YouTube channel afterwards, probably within 24 hours. Invite folks to reach out to either myself or Kory or both of us if you've got certain questions that you want to follow up on. We're always open. So thank you so much.
Sweet. Thanks, Skip.
Enjoy lunch.